How does it affect your business if certain ports on the East Coast, like Savannah, are not able to accept the larger ships by the time you open?
Well, I think that it's not going to affect us really directly. I think that it's going to affect more those ports who are not, ready, because the cargo will move to, other ports.
In other words, there are enough ports that can handle it that it won't affect you. It'll just affect those that aren't.
Yeah, because actually, as long as you have ports ready, you have actually a better system, and of course that will benefit the canal, okay? Because the system overall is better, and I think that it will continue to improve. I don't think that it's something that if you don't do it, immediately is going to affect you. I think that it has to be something that you have to think about and be ready to do it, okay? And when you do it, basically when the demand is there for that. So today, that discussion, again, is going on. It's, there are some issues that has to be resolved. And basically my message is that sometimes I wonder, if the canal was built in 10 years, okay, from 1904 to 1914, and it was a magnificent piece of infrastructure, one of the wonders of the world.
With many issues as well.
With many issues, and much more difficult times. Today with the technology, sometimes I wonder why do we take so much time to make decisions, okay? When you have all the information and you are able to analyze that in a much faster way with modeling. And maybe what happened is that since we now are able to know so much, we want to know more, okay?
Yeah, and one of the questions I also had was, how are you preparing your ports? I know you have ports on either side of the canal. How are those being affected?
Well, actually, they are growing, and they are growing very fast. Today, Panama is the largest port in in all of the Americas, in Latin America, because we surpassed the port of Santos in Brazil. In throughput, we are about 6.6 million TEUs in the system in Panama, and I call it a system because actually Panama is the only port in the world that actually has terminal in two oceans. That's the way I view Panama. Because for me it's a port system that actually I can reposition a container to the Pacific or to the Atlantic in less than an hour. So basically it's terminals in the two oceans, and that is why Panama is growing so much.
A lot of the increased traffic in Savannah has been predicated on the inability to get some of those container vessels into the Long Beach ports and ports on the West Coast. And obviously that's benefited your business because there's been more traffic through the canal to come to the East Coast. How do you foresee the West Coast ports reacting, or how are they reacting to your expansion, and how are you prepared to be competitive with that?
Well, I think that the West Coast ports actually, again, it's like anything in the system. The system in itself has to improve. There's some congestion, or there had been some congestions before in the Westport ports. I think that when you look at Savannah, other ports, is more than the port itself. It's actually the port and also the distribution centers and the connectivity you provide. And then you can have an all-water route service that actually will be better benefiting through Savannah. There will be some cargo that actually is going to go rail, depending where the cargo goes. If you bring a ship with a lot of cargo that actually is going to be unloaded and it's going to be used in California. California itself is a very large area, and all those neighboring hinterland, let's call all those other states, like Idaho and Washington State and so on. They will use the West Coast ports. But also there can be cargo that actually will go further down and goes to Chicago and goes to the Midwest of the U.S. Depends on issues such as the value of the cargo, the time to deliver, and so on. So there's always going to be a lot of cargo through the West Coast of the U.S. But they need to improve also because they are also competing. And they need to compete with other ports, let's say in Canada, or and also to maintain the good service they need to provide for their clients. So I don't see that as a direct competition, really. I think that every port, and I mean it, every port needs to improve in order to be competitive. That's actually what should be looked at. I think that the canal opens up a lot of alternatives, okay, that will benefit the U.S. and actually will even benefit the West Coast, for instance, because there's a lot of cargo that comes out of the West Coast that goes to Europe, and they go through the Panama Canal. Okay, there's a cargo that goes out of Seattle that goes to Europe, and actually you go through the canal. So it's not only, or it goes to the to the east side of the Americas. So of course, there's utilization of the canal both ways. Okay, and what we are doing is basically improving, having a larger canal that allows for larger ships. See, no longer you can have, and that's also very good for in the reliability area of the canal to the U.S. because you can no longer have a constraint that if something happens in the, let's say there's a strike or something that it happens before, well, the ships can actually come through the Panama Canal and hit the East Coast. So it balances out the systems. Yeah. It opens more options.
I want to go back to what you said about why it takes us so long to make decisions. Georgia's been studying the deepening of the Savannah Harbor for 12 years now, I think. And you're doing a much bigger project, a $5.25 billion project. We're talking about a $600 million project. But you've made that decision, you've moved forward with it. What was the key to kind of getting that buy-in from your populace and from the stakeholders there?
We needed to basically explain what was in for them, you know, for the people of Panama, what was what we were trying to do and how that would benefit them. I understand, and I think that there's a lot of support. I was with your governor just yesterday, and he's a very strong supporter. I think that also you have a lot of people supporting this expansion or this deepening of the Port of Savannah. There are some issues with Charleston, and what I've been basing my message has been basically both ports are needed. You know, I don't think that this kind of a competition one against the other. I think that they need to understand that both ports are going to benefit, you know, and therefore, and I think that that's also something that has to be understood. You know, it's not that one is going to sacrifice the other, you know, and therefore, just like when they ask me if I think that, you know, what happened if they build a port in El Salvador or another port in Guatemala or Nicaragua, I said build them because you're going to need it, okay.
So obviously, you're projecting that global trade is going to be so huge that all these ports are going to.
Well, I think that.
I mean, what about a time like we've just had?
Well, because I think, look, when you look at the size of Georgia, okay, Georgia is bigger than many countries, okay. When you look at South Carolina, same thing. You know, it's you have trade that you're going to continue, you know, and as long as both ports are efficient, okay. It will benefit the people of South Carolina, it will benefit the people of Georgia, okay? You know, it's not kind of competing. Today they are one next to the other, and both of them are actually doing well.
I think the issue is more that they have to make the case it's going to benefit the entire U.S. because they're looking at funding from Congress.
Well, exactly, but at the end it benefit the U.S. because actually they will attack different, you know, even though they look at the same market, they are actually going to different areas, which actually all of that will improve. So yes, I think that when you look at what is the issue, you know, and you see the size of the investment, which actually didn't start being 600 million, actually was a lot less, you know, 10 years ago. Okay, so as you don't make decisions, then the cost is still, you know, creeping up, and that is actually the cost of not making decisions. Okay, so at the end of the day, that's part of the discussion. Okay, that is going on, and I think that as we open, there will be more pressure. Okay. From not only the shipping lines, actually from your exporters, your producers, you know, because you need to get to the market, okay? And that's not that you cannot get to the market. You can get to the market, but you cannot do it as efficient as, and that's why when you look at the results of the studies, as I understand, it has a very good investment because, you know, it's I think something like 5 to 1, okay, which is fantastic, okay? But then there's some other issues of, you know, that needs to be resolved.